You know, after the book came out, it was a phenomenon. Nobody, starting with me, had any idea that it was going to be received as it was. It was as if some button had been pushed, some magical button. Many, many people, all colors, all religions, all nations, grabbed up the idea of genealogy. And the book eventually was published in 37 languages, all over the world. I didn't know about books that big. I had no idea, and I don't think they did either, really how big Roots was going to be. Yeah, when I think about it and look back upon that time, it just comes to me with such force that none of us at that table had the slightest idea what really was going to happen when it was made into a television show. Uh, there was no way to know, to anticipate, because you need to have some kind of precedent. I have often thought that my grandmother made a point to tell the story to me because she knew if she didn't, it would never get to me, not through the normal means. Anyway, I grew up hearing this story night after night that summer and subsequent summers. Incredible wonder that something they had passed down from front porches to front porches or whatever was in fact now documented in some piece of... I was, as we say in the South, ruined by my grandparents. My hero was my grandfather. His name was Will Palmer. He was tall, straight, black. In the little town of Henning, he owned a little lumber company. When I was 5, my beloved grandfather rather abruptly died. It was as if the bottom fell out of the world. Even I, little boy that I was, 5 years old, I could tell that if Grandma didn't do something, she was just going under. And after a while, she did do something. She wrote 5 letters, and she was writing each of her sisters, asking them to come and spend the next summer with us. Within the space of about 10 days, our home, which had been like a tomb for so long, all of a sudden now was vibrant, alive, exciting, laughter. And in the evening, there was a repetitive pattern of what happened. We would have supper, and then the sisters would get up and just kind of trickle toward the front porch. And they would talk. First, they would talk about themselves as girls. I was a little boy right behind Grandma's chair. And after a time, they would segue into their parents. They talked about their father, mostly, Tom Murray. Strong man, physically. Strong-willed as a personality. It wouldn't be too long before either Grandma or one of her sisters there in the dark would say something like, oh, he was just scandalous. When I heard that, I knew they were now getting ready to lay into their daddy's daddy. And this was the one that you could tell they loved him, but they just loved to tear him up verbally. He was the family sinner. He was the one who was a fighter of gamecocks, the one called Chicken George. Then they would talk about his mother. Their whole manner would change. They became reverent as they talked about Miss Kizzy. Her father, Miss Kizzy's father, was an African buggy driver for the master. He would point out from time to time simple things, tree, rock, cow, sky, things like that. And he would tell her the names for these things in his native tongue. One of the sounds which would bear the greatest significance of any others was the sound he would point at a river, and he would say, Cambi Bolongo. And Miss Kizzy came to know Cambi Bolongo River. But anyway, that was the story that Grandma and them told about the family. I guess it probably was something in the area of 35 years after being on the front porch in Henning, Tennessee with Grandma and her sisters, my great aunts, that I by now was a writer, I had moved from writing magazine articles to my first book, one called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. I was walking around in Washington one day after that book was turned in, and I really didn't know what to do with myself. And that's when I happened to go into the archives and saw the rolls of tape and how I began to work on Roots. And I'm just kind of engrossed in all this as I keep turning and keep looking. And then I came to something that, what in the world am I looking at there? Below my gaze was Murray, M-U-R-R-A-Y, comma, Thomas. His age, I don't remember, colored, B for black. His occupation, blacksmith. How many times on the front porch in Henning, Tennessee, had I heard Grandma, her sister, they Leah, they plus, all the others talking about their daddy, Tom Murray, the blacksmith, Alamance County. Then there were the others. And the names didn't surprise me. I grew up as a little boy, 6, 7 years old, listening to these ladies talk. By this time, I'm galvanized. I began to get a kind of, I guess it was kind of an involuntary interest in that which later would become Roots. One of the greatest puzzles and challenges involved in the whole story was the sounds that my grandmother and some others had retained, which had come down the line. My grandma, when she was ironing, sometimes would say these, what we call the African sounds. Everywhere I would go, I would sort of talk about what I was trying to do. And finally, one day, I was in Utica, New York, Utica College, and I spoke of my search, and a professor came over and he said, there is someone who might interest you over at Hamilton College, which was in Clinton, New York. I met this young African. He was small. He had very little to say. His little eyes followed you. And his name was Ibu Manga. He was from a country called the Gambia. And I told him my sounds and some little bit of my story. And I felt like I was ready to soar off somewhere when Ibu, in his quiet way, said to me, after thinking a bit about it, he said, the Kembe Bolongo, I believe, may very well be a bit of Mandinka tongue. And he said, Bolongo means something like large, moving body of water, like a river. And he said, Kembe, preceded by Kembe, it probably meant Gambia River. Well, I just never imagined such a thing. Even though I had tried, I never imagined I would be able to come up with anything that finite. And it was Ibu who got permission to go with me to the Gambia. He told me on the way about the people called griots who tell the histories. And Ibu took me to a village and he translated. The story told by the griot went on and on and on. This man told the story in its essence of a man whose name was Omaro. Omaro grew up there in the village, and he married a young woman named Binta Keba. And in time, Binta Keba gave him 4 children. He told how the youngest son, Madi, was lost in some fishing accident in the river. The oldest, the one named Kunta, he said that he had gone away from the village to chop wood with the intent of making a drum for his brother Lami, and he was never seen again. Now, I had grown up in Lauderdale County, Tennessee, sitting on the front porch, listening to Grandma, Aunt Leah, all the sisters talk and periodically tell that item in the story, where Kinte, the African buggy driver for Masawala, as they called him, would tell his daughter about how he had been cutting wood, intending to make a drum for his brother when he was captured and taken away. It was for me rather as if I had goosebumps the size of tennis balls. I just could hardly comprehend what this meant. I should also tell you that Evel had told me earlier that they, in their talk, were saying they had never seen a black American. I was the first. And now the man said, in Mandinka, through the translator, yes, we have been told that there are many of us from this place who are in exile in that place called America and in other places. Boy, that hit me like a shot, realizing that they were not seeing me as Alex Haley Writer. They didn't know who he was. To 1977, the state of racial relations in this country had advanced not a whole lot past what it had been after the end of World War II. There had been the characteristic resistance to black gains. After World War II, there came, I remember, a kind of thing where one person here black or another person there would get advanced, would get into some position which was without precedent, and there was a lot of talk about the first black who did this. I was one. I was made the first journalist, and of course, and then the first chief journalist, and I retired as such. Now, by now, it's very different. Major changes have been made. By no means are the changes what ought to be or what need to be. There is indeed almost a renaissance of fresh interest in Malcolm X. He died in 1965, I believe it was 65, and today we're talking about 1992 to measure up. It's a long time, and for a time after his death, he was kind of quiet. His image was kind of quiet. Dr. King's soared early on and has continued to do so. But Malcolm began, I suppose, about 4 or 5 years ago. And the feeling I kind of have come to have is that young people, young black people in particular, are looking for a clean, strong image of leadership. And Malcolm fits that bill. He was clean as a hound's tooth in terms of the image he presented once he became a member of the Nation of Islam. He is now, like Dr. King, virtually regarded as a saint. And I just find it a phenomenon, and I feel myself so privileged to have written about this man who is one of the icons in the black experience. We are different. And the thing I like about that in particular is that we should, I think, celebrate our differences. And we should share with others the things which make us different. We should all be very proud of those things which make us individualistic. There's nothing that intrigues me more than to try and go find out about Polish people, about Greek people, about Spanish people, about whatever else, and learn things about them that give me a better collected picture of what might be called we the people.
When you really come down to it, we're one family in this country, broad, extended, loose family. And what we do with one piece of it, and in the case if we talk about, again, just come down to black people, I think we're talking about, I think it's 12% of the population. And we're sorely not realizing the potential that lies within that 12%. We're throwing many of them out to the wolves. And that's not so much black people's loss as it is the United States of America's terrible loss.
It is a legacy, it was handed down to me. Poor dirt farmer, skinny mule. parts the red clay like it was the Red Sea. It is a legacy, both me and you. You are a black man, I am a white man. Both come from the Southland, both doing best we can. Where the Grim Reaper is my brother's keeper, the way my brother was kept. Small wonder Jesus wept. It is a legacy passed down to you and me. What we're taught to believe, we never question these things. It is a legacy, so wild and bitter seed, blown across those fertile fields where the roots run deep. We both got calloused hands, blue-collared working men, down here in Bubba Land. What's in a name? Both living rent to rent, some own the government. We are quite different, we are the same. It is a legacy passed down to you and me. What we learn to believe, we never question these.
Say it! Toby! Who are you? Say your name. What's your name?
Toby.
Cut him down.
Nobody who was present will ever forget that scene. It was filmed in Savannah, Georgia. We thought that Lou Gossett, playing fiddler, would probably just take over in an ad-lib way. That's how it had been written, to let him ad-lib. But when LeVar was cut down, all of a sudden we watched Lou do something nobody could act. He became a flood of tears. His body shuddered. He cried out from his soul, and everybody there cried with him.
There's gonna be another day. You hear me? There's gonna be another day.
I always like to think that symbol is the best perspective I know to take toward the future, not for black people, but for all of us. We all need to realize that we descend from people who were represented by that scene before the Civil War, and everybody was scared to death. The blacks were scared because everything they'd experienced made them have reason to be scared. They didn't know who was going to win the war nor what would happen to them in any event. There was another group of people. You don't hear too much about them in books, but they were in great number. They were called poor whites. They were, in many cases, worse off than slaves. They had no value to anybody. And then there were the masters, the skilled people, the people with money, who were scared to death, and they knew their problem. If they lost, the South lost, they were ruined. And so it was that these people all prayed for a better day, not for themselves, because their die was cast and they knew it, but they prayed that the war, when it ended, whichever way it ended, would result in a better day for their children to live in, and then implicit in that for their children's children to live in. We probably represent the greatest, most brilliant answer to a prayer there is on the face of earth. Because those who wished for a better day for us couldn't have fantasized the world we live in today. The things we do, the things we have, the things we aspire for our children.
Question things. It is a legacy.
Stay with us and accentuate the positive. Up now, Scott Ross takes an insightful look at some of today's top authors in Bestseller. Next. And tomorrow.